Hi guys, this is Jesse. The title of this video I'm planning on calling "When you change your behavior, you change your brain." And I've got a really cool trick for you to do basically. I call it a trick, but it's actually, a form of therapy. But before we go on to it, I'd like to say a few things first. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to timestamp this video so that if you want to skip over what I'm about to address, that's entirely up to you. But I'd really appreciate it if you listened to me and heard me out. Now, it seems to me that a lot of my earlier videos, or at least some of them anyway, I unwittingly give reassurance. I find it hard sometimes to talk about HOCD or any form of OCD actually without inadvertently slipping in reassurance statements. And my earlier videos were never really meant for that. I was just trying to show distinctions. And I think it's very important while you're listening to this is not to listen to any HOCD videos over and over and over and over, especially for reassurance, because you're defeating the whole purpose of, you need to get better basically. And you're not going to get better if you're going to keep reassuring yourself. All you're doing is keeping yourself comfortable. There's another sort of discrepancy that I'd like to talk about as well. In my second video, the second video that I ever made, it's basically a 5-step exposure which I have at the end of the video. But during the course of that video, I speak about a buddy of mine called Billy. And I'd read a thing on the internet about a guy, excuse me, who masturbated basically to the false arousal and what have you. And armed with that information, I give that information to Billy and I explain this in the video. Now, of course, this is now infamously known as the masturbating video. And I mean, apparently encouraging people to masturbate. If people had listened to that video all the way through, they would realise that I wasn't encouraging people to masturbate. I was just talking about a buddy of mine and the advice that I had given him. So I have to say here and now, I absolutely do not insist that anybody masturbates as an exposure. Not at all. The 5-step method at the end was to work through the imagination, and the imagination only. But, if people want better results, they're better off going to my golden exposures. So anyway, on to the video. When you change your behaviour, you change your brain. Now, recently, I've been reading a book called Brain Lock. Brain Lock, it's by a guy called Jeffrey Schwartz. And I'm really enjoying this book. And what he does is a 4-step method called relabel, reattribute, refocus, and revalue. Now, what I'm going to do today, I'm just going to talk about step 3, which is refocus. And I do suggest you buy this book. There are discrepancies amongst the professionals and amongst people online. Everyone's got their different ways of dealing with OCD. Jeffrey Schwartz, this is his way of dealing with OCD. Now, in the past, I've talked about what I would call the bottom-down approach. This is my own language. This is, I'm not using any official language. This is my own. I've used the bottom-down approach where you basically confront the uncertainty, which is what it's all about, through the imagination. And I've spoken about imaginal exposure, writing things down over and over and over and over, and what have you. Okay, what this is, I would say, is the bottom-up approach. This refocus that I'm about to talk about. It's basically just cutting out your compulsions, or at least delaying them. And here's a neat little trick. When you have a HOCD thought, I don't know, let's say you're in the kitchen, for example, and you're making yourself a cup of coffee or making yourself something to eat, and a HOCD thought comes in. Like sexual fluidity. Oh, sexual fluidity. Oh, I can't, and they immediately try to suppress that thought or to neutralize it. Or maybe I'm gay, or, I think I'm attracted to that guy on the TV, and so on and so forth. What people do is they immediately try, like I said, to push that thought away. Argue with the thought, reason with the thought, touch something 3 times, flick the light switch off and on, say things to themselves over and over, I'm straight, I'm straight, I'm straight. And they do all these different compulsions, right? Here's the thing. Time delay. Time delay. What you do is when you get a compulsion, or you get an urge to do a compulsion after having the intrusive thought, instead of doing the compulsion straight away, train your brain to deal with the uncertainty. Teach your brain that that thought is irrelevant by a time delay. Now, I would go personally for 15 minutes. You have the intrusive thought. Instead of doing the compulsion, wait. Wait 15 minutes. And if you really must cave into the compulsion, then do it after 15 minutes. Now, for newbies and beginners, this is going to be very hard. 15 minutes is going to be perhaps too overwhelming. So, don't be so hard on yourself. Start off small and build upwards. So you could start with 30 seconds, or a minute, or 2 minutes, or 5 minutes, or whatever you can manage. Don't do the compulsion. Don't suppress the thought. Don't argue with the thought. Don't do any rituals for a certain amount of time. Say to yourself, okay, I'm going to give it a minute or 2 minutes. And if I got to cave into the compulsion, I'll do it after 2 minutes or whatever goal that you set. But here's the cool thing. Instead of passively waiting, sitting down on your bum and waiting for time to pass before doing the compulsion, the great thing you can do is, while you're feeling the distress inside, you get the intrusive thought. You say to yourself, okay, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I'm not going to do a compulsion. And that pain that you feel inside, don't suppress it, keep it there, and refocus your attention on something else. It could be a video game. It could be you need to take out the trash. In my case, something happened to me yesterday, which I'll talk about. I went for a walk and stuck headphones on. And I was feeling, really anxious inside, but I didn't cave in. I refocused my attention. So when you refocus your attention, you're making it easier for yourself. You're making it easier for yourself to actually delay that compulsion. And as you're doing it, the brain is slowly but surely getting the message that it can handle it. Okay, picture this, for example, right? Let's say you're in school and there's a bully in your class or in the school that's trying to intimidate you. Let's say you're in the cafeteria and there he is a few tables away and he's staring at you. And his eyes are like steel. He will not take his eyes off you. And you're feeling afraid and you're feeling anxious and your body is in a state of fight or flight. So, the security see what he's doing and take him away. Now that's all very well. But what's going to happen is that the next time you see the bully, you're going to feel the same. And security takes him away. And you see the bully again. And you feel afraid again. See, that's a metaphor for pushing down the intrusive thought. You can push down the intrusive thought, but when it comes back, just like the bully, it's going to frighten you again. What you need to do is let it be. So going back to the cafeteria metaphor, you say to the security, no, it's okay, guys, leave him there. Leave him there. Don't bother him. Let him stare at me. So you leave the bully stare. And half an hour goes by. An hour goes by. And he hasn't done anything. He's full of shit. He's not actually going to hurt you. He's just trying to intimidate you. But the more time you spend in the same room as that bully, the more and more and more comfortable you'll eventually feel. Because your brain will get the message that this isn't really a threat. And so it is with thoughts. You get the intrusive thought, you delay the compulsion. While you're delaying the compulsion, you turn your attention to doing an activity, preferably one that you enjoy. And if you eventually must give in to the compulsion, then do it after the time that you've set yourself. As I said, you start off with a minute, build up to 5 minutes, build up to 15 minutes. Right, something happened to me yesterday, and I want to talk about this because I think this might help you. Now, I do suffer with a bit of scrupulosity, and for some reason or other, I think it was because I was tired. I was very tired yesterday. And when you're tired, your brain doesn't feel like it can cope in the way that, you would if you had good sleep. So I'm not going to say what it is, but it was a very intrusive, negative thought. And I was carrying this feeling of dread around with me all day. All day. And I couldn't, yes, I admit, I think I was pushing it out of my mind at first. But what I decided to do is to hell with it. I'm not going to push it away. I'm going to welcome it. So I welcomed the thought. And I visualized it. And what I did, I refocused my attention. I thought, I'm not going to give in to the compulsion anymore. I'm not going to push it away, not going to argue with it. I'm going to let it do its worst, and I'm going to go for a walk. And I put my coat on, put my rucksack on, put my headphones on, and I started listening to an audiobook. And I was walking around. I walked about 3 or 4 miles with carrying this feeling of dread and anxiety. But I would not give in to the compulsion. I would not push that thought away. And after I finished my walk, I felt great. I really did. And I had a brilliant night last night. I had no problems. I woke up this morning and literally feel like a different guy because I refused to give in to the compulsion. It's always hard, guys. It's, but it's better to have the pain now than to have the pain later. Because as long as you're pushing that thought away, as long as the security guards are throwing that bully out, you're only going to have to face it again. So what I'll do is, just before I sign off, I'll go through the whole thing with you one more time, just so that it stands out in your mind, okay? You get an intrusive thought. I'm gay. Maybe I'm gay. I think I'm attracted to that guy over there. Sexual fluidity. Oh my God. So the next thing is, okay, I need to suppress that thought. I need to argue with that thought. I need to neutralize that thought. I need to touch something 3 times. I need to flick the light switch off and on, or whatever compulsions you do. Don't do it. Delay. Say to yourself, okay, if I really must do the compulsion, wait. Time delay. Time delay. Time delay. Wait 30 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes or whatever it is that you can manage. And refocus your attention on an activity, preferably that you like, because it's better to do that than to sit and think, okay, I'm warding off the compulsion, I'm not doing anything, I'm sitting on my bum. And, you're more prone to give into the compulsion if you sit around. But if you, literally keep yourself active, and this is a very important thing, just refocus does not mean suppression. You are not suppressing it. You are keeping the feeling of anxiety there with you. You're embracing it, but you're just refocusing your attention. For example, you could walk along the road, right? Thinking about your, OCD in some way. And as you walk across the road, a car comes at you. Whoosh! And you're just going to jump across the road so that you don't get hit by the car. Your brain has kicked in emergency, get off the road. That isn't suppression. That's redirection. That's the brain redirecting you somewhere else. Suppression is when you literally push the thought down so that you can continue. I mean, people do this with grief. I did this when my mother died. I hardly grieved my mother's death. I pushed it down so that I could carry on in life. And that's one of the worst things you can do. You need to grieve it out. And so it is with anxiety or any emotion. If you bury it down, all you're doing is saving it for a later date. So, you get the intrusive thought. You refuse to do the compulsion. You do not suppress it. You keep the feeling there, residing in your consciousness. But you just redirect your attention, play a video game, Xbox, PlayStation, whatever. And this will train the brain. And I know I've repeated myself a lot in this video, but I'm doing it so that it'll, basically sink in. You basically just focus your attention on something else, and eventually your brain will stand down from alert if you do it often enough, because you'll see. And I know I talk about facing your fears and stuff like that, but really getting rid of the fear is an added bonus. Basically what you're doing is you're teaching your brain that this thought is irrelevant. Irrelevant. If your car alarm started going off all the time, and you jump out of bed and you run towards your car, and intending to make a sort of arrest of the guy who's stealing your car, but there's nobody there. and the car alarm goes off quite often, and every time you run out and there's nobody there. Eventually, unless you actually get the product fixed, eventually you're just going to need to calm down and realize that it's a false alarm, and that you don't react emotionally to your car alarm going off. And that's what you're doing with the brain. Your brain is starting to see the thought as a false message. Yes, that's right. It's a false message coming from your brain. And the more you practice these steps, the more your brain will see this as a false message and stand down from alert. So what happens in the end, the goal isn't to get rid of the thought. The goal is not to give a fuck about the thought. Excuse my language. And to see the thought as irrelevant. And once that happens, I mean, you may get intrusive thoughts from time to time, but your brain will know how to deal with it. Your brain will learn to deal with the uncertainty, because it's the uncertainty that is at the very core of OCD. It doesn't matter whether it's homosexual OCD, harm OCD, scrupulosity, you can go down the line. Uncertainty is the root cause of all of them. And that's what you're teaching your brain to do. Anyway, I've really gone on long enough. But it's, this book, Brain Lock, is well worth reading. I do suggest you buy it. And I will actually be doing a book review pretty soon on, the various books that I've read. So take care, guys. God bless you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.